Shalom, everyone. So the shul experience is a complicated experience. And we're entering a space that is holy. We've created holy space together. We're transitioning from our homes into the holy space. We build community together. We have a very holy, intimate experience with God. It's complicated. And as we're transitioning, as we're getting ready to come to shul, we all experience that moment where we ask that question of ourselves over and over, what to wear, what to wear. And it repeats. Every time we're going to get ready for shul, we're standing in front of our closets thinking, what to wear? And it goes through our minds, and we think it's actually a very mundane thing, but I do want to talk about our clothing. And the reason I want to talk about our clothing is because that seems to be what's going on in the Parsha this week, over and over and over again. The Torah is talking about clothing. And we look at it, and we can't help but notice how many times it's happening to Joseph in particular, but not only to Joseph, but clearly focusing on Joseph and his clothes. How many times is he going to be changing his clothes? And it happens over and over again. And then we look at it and we think, truthfully, he's never changing his clothes. Other people are changing his clothes for him constantly. Every time he meets a new circumstance, someone else is changing his clothes on him. And it's not something we're not supposed to notice because the Torah is telling it to us over and over again. It starts with what we culturally now know as that multicolored coat. Joseph and his multicolored coat, except it's not multicolored. Broadway did that to us. When we actually look in the text says, kutonet pasim, it's striped. And now, to us, it might as well be multicolored because we don't understand the significance of that. Did Jacob just decide to gift Joseph with nice clothing? You're in the ancient world. This is a patriarch. You want to gift your son with something, give him sheep. Give him something that's going to matter. What are you giving him nice clothes? He's not giving him nice clothes. He's giving him symbolic clothes. And that's where we miss it, but everyone in the ancient world would get it. The way that a patriarch designates the next heir is to give them a striped cloak. And they walk around with the striped cloak, so everybody who sees them knows there's your next leader. There's the heir. It's not nice clothing, it's meaningful clothing. Jacob has designated Joseph as the next patriarch. He gave him the coat. And Joseph has no choice but to wear it. What's he going to do? It's not a gift that's nice, it's a designation. And he doesn't have a choice with it. So he wears it. And when we look at it, it tells us that in fact, Joseph did it because he favored him. The Torah tells us that explicitly. But then it tells us the brothers hate him. And now we fully understand the hatred. They're not sitting there going, ooh, I wish I had a nice coat. You want a nice coat, go get a nice coat. They're wealthy enough to get coats. This isn't about clothing. They're looking at Joseph, and they hate him because Jacob just designated him heir. And now let's unpack that one. If Jacob designated Joseph heir, Joseph is firstborn of Rachel. Jacob just designated Rachel matriarch, because the matriarch gives birth to the heir. And she's the second wife. She's not the first wife. Leah's the first wife. And all those brothers are the sons of Leah. This is why they hate Joseph for wearing that coat, is because what Jacob just did is elevated Rachel over their mother. It's one thing to insult someone. Watch what happens if you insult their mother. This is a sensitivity point that hits to the core, and it hits to the core of us as human beings. It's not culture specific, it's not time specific, it's not empire specific. It's everywhere. Head to someone's mother and insult and offend their mother, watch the reaction. That's what we're seeing going on in the Torah. This isn't about a coat. Far more layered than that. And the Midrash tells us Leah's still alive while this is going on, so she sees it. She sees that her sister wife Rachel, who by the way has died, so now there's no way to win that one. That one's done. So she's watching the son of her sister wife, designated heir, designating Her already deceased sister, matriarch, nothing she can do. She sits there now and watches it, and all her sons watch her watching it, and the hatred builds. So we begin to understand the importance of what's gone on. When they kidnap him, first thing we're told they do is they strip the coat off him. Of course they strip the coat off him. It's not about the clothing. It's about getting the title off him. They don't want him to be heir. And the only way to do that is get that coat off of him. They take the coat and they dip it in blood so that now that coat is going to designate that he has become prey to an animal. He's actually become food, is the message they're delivering to their father. The ultimate of downfall. From being the leader, the mighty, the powerful, he turned into food for a wild animal. He can't have fallen any lower. They've done it on purpose. The cloak becomes the proof. So we watch that his father dressed him and his brothers undressed him. And he actually had no say in the matter. No say in whether he should be dressed that way, no say in the fact that they're taking the coat away from him. He's absolutely silent in the text. He ends up sold into slavery in Potiphar's house, and he is put in charge of all the other slaves. That means he's dressed a certain way, because you want to visually know who's in charge of all the other slaves. So Potiphar's now dressed him, again. And then we have Potiphar's wife, and that whole incident with Potiphar's wife, where she accuses him of rape. He actually holds his moral core, will not sleep with her because he does view it as a betrayal of his master. He leaves. What does she do? Text tells us she grabs his robe. She grabs his coat. He runs away. She's holding on to it. And again now, someone has undressed Joseph. So someone dressed Joseph, someone else undressed Joseph. And then she accuses him of betrayal. And what is the proof? The clothing. And it keeps happening to him again and again. These accusations, everyone else is dressing him, everyone else is undressing him, and then he's accused of all kinds of things, and the proof is always the clothes that they're holding. So we think, well, maybe that's the end of it, except another downfall. He now ends up in prison. And as he's in prison, and the dream sequencing, and he can interpret dreams, so he's getting ready now to be presented to Pharaoh to interpret the dreams. And what does the text go out of its way to tell us? He is bathed and clothed by the prison guards. One more time, someone else is dressing Joseph. And Joseph now appears before Pharaoh and interprets Pharaoh's dreams beautifully. Joseph is honored and promoted by Pharaoh, and what are we told Pharaoh does? Gives him a new name, gives him a ring, and dresses him in royal robes. How many times is the Torah going to talk to us about Joseph's clothes? It keeps appearing over and over and over again. But these clothes are going to stay. These are the clothes he will spend the rest of his life wearing. It's the clothes of royalty that Pharaoh has dressed him in. Which means he ends up where he started, because he is put second in command of Egypt, dressed accordingly. That's exactly what Jacob did to him. Jacob said, "You are now second in command, upcoming heir. I dress you accordingly." He ends up where he started, but he's in a different culture, in a different family, in a different identity, but the same thing has happened to him. And we look at it and we think, poor Joseph never gets to stand there and ask what to wear, because it's never been his choice. It's never been his expression. He is the canvas where other people are painting their expectations on him. Whether it's his father, whether it's the prison guard, whether it's Potiphar, whether it's Pharaoh, it happens over and over again. Everyone else looks at Joseph, thinks they see an identity, and they're going to dress him accordingly. And he is entirely silent throughout it all. It is never his expression of who he is. It's never his identity. Years later, his brothers are going to end up in Egypt. They're going to be standing right in front of him, and we're told they're not going to recognize him. Why? Because they can't see past the clothes. But that's who they've always been. They couldn't see past the clothes. They couldn't see Joseph, their brother, as long as he was wearing that striped coat. They couldn't see past the clothes. So the same thing is happening now again. And that's when we realize it's actually a challenge we all face whenever we see each other. Can we see past the clothes? Do we see the person? How do we understand the expressions of our clothes? Because they are expressions. That's what's happening to Joseph. That's what the Torah wants us to be paying attention to. Clothing is part of our identity. It's a choice we make in what we want to communicate. These are choices that we are making. They are expressions, they are communications of us. And it's not just a cultural choice, but the Torah is telling us it's a Jewish choice. So when we look at that, we're going to search further. And the Talmud actually brings a very interesting comment from one of the rabbis who says, the ancient equivalent of what to wear, because he says that before he would go pray, he would choose his clothing to express his prayer. If he were intending to say a prayer of gratitude, that there's something in his life that he should be grateful for, he says, I head for the colors and the finery, so that I can show my gratitude in my clothing, stand before God and say, I am grateful, look at what I'm wearing. But if he said, it is a prayer of petition, there is suffering, there's strife in the world, there's poverty in the world, people are suffering, he says, I'm not heading for the finery and the clothes, I'm heading for the muted, I'm headed for the humble, I'm headed for I can dress and stand before God and say, look at me, my clothing is expressing that I need you. And he actually combined the two together with what we're seeing with Joseph. The clothing is an expression, and what he's telling us, it's actually a prayer. It's included in our words, our bodies, and what we chose to dress ourselves in. It makes most sense because Judaism tells us that our bodies are holy. So how much more fitting would it be to say that what we cover them with is also holy and part of our prayer? It brings home the point that we look at Joseph with all of his iterations, that he never had the choice and he could never self-identify. He could never stand there and say, this is who I am and this is how I choose to express it. This is what I'm wearing. We never have that moment from him. So we appreciate that we do have that moment. And the rabbi who tells us, make it part of your prayer, make it part of your expression, because everything we communicate with God comes through with every choice we make, even the ones we think are so mundane, even when we stand there and ask, getting ready for shul, what should I wear? Shabbat shalom.